And so the question is, what happens now? It's hard to see at this current moment, but Patrick McHenry, at least in our conversations last week at our policy summit here in DC, he was very adamant that he's going to be moving all crypto legislation as much as far as he can. And he's determined to do whatever it takes. And in some cases, holding up other bills so that he gets consideration for his bill.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that I've been using since 2018. Uphold has all the top cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and all the altcoins. In fact, they have 260 plus cryptocurrencies on their platform. You can also trade precious metals, stablecoins, and 37 fiat currencies. In addition, they are available in over 150 countries. And this platform is fully reserved. They do audits, so you can trust that your funds are safe, no commingling, no lending out your funds. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Ron Hammond, who's Director of Government Relations at the Blockchain Association. Ron, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Always great to be on. And man, we have a lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a packed 24 hours. So many things that have happened. The presidential debates, Elizabeth Warren and Jamie Dimon, and much more. I do want to start, though, with Patrick McHenry announcing his retirement. And I want to get your thoughts on if that impacts the crypto bills that are in the House.
Yes, definitely. So Patrick McHenry, for those who may not know, he is the chair of the Financial Services Committee. So all crypto bills that go through the Financial Services Committee, and they do go through other committees, but that's the primary one, the House. He announced that he's going to be retiring. That has major implications. Now, mind you, again, we did hear rumors that this is probably his last go around earlier this year. I mean, he has 3 young kids. He's been in Congress for 20 years. And he actually passed up a chance to be in leadership specifically for crypto legislation. He said, back in January, February timeframe that he wanted to be financial services chair because he wanted to move crypto legislation. And now we're kind of entering election year. Everything kind of grinds to a halt here in DC. And it's unclear if more of he's seeing that this could be a longer process, especially for things like market structure. We've been hearing that from French Hill, Jim Himes, and several others on both sides of the aisle. That's a more complicated piece of legislation. But Patrick McHenry has really put his heart and soul both from the staff and himself personally onto this bill, getting Democrats along the way. And I think, unfortunately, with the speaker drama and him being the temporary speaker for quite some time, again, it wasn't something he wanted, but a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle say he's someone who can bring the peace. And so now the question is, what's next? We have his 2 bills, the stablecoin bill and the market structure bill. They're still waiting for a vote on the House floor. If they have any chance in the Senate, they're going to need bipartisan support. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because we've seen in the past some members of Congress who are retiring saying, or those around them saying, look, you're retiring, we really don't care. Mm-hmm. On the other end, we've seen the opposite. We've seen some folks saying, you're retiring, you put a lot of effort into this body, we love to give you some deference. And so the question is, what happens now? It's hard to see at this current moment, but Patrick McHenry, at least in our conversations last week at our policy summit here in DC, he was very adamant that he's going to be moving all crypto legislation as much as far as he can. And he's determined to do whatever it takes. And in some cases, holding up other bills so that he gets consideration for his bill. So I think it's actually, at least in the next year, I think it's a positive that Patrick McHenry is going to be even more gung-ho. But at the same time, we'll see if it happens. Congress tends to not act, especially in election years, and that kind of complicates things.
Sure, yeah. And I'm hoping, man, they can get these bills out the House, get them into the Senate, and at least we make some progress. And also other folks are keeping their eye on Patrick McHenry threatened a subpoena against SEC Chair Gary Gensler. You think that's still on the table, and maybe it's easier for him because he's going to be on his way out later next year?
It's definitely possibly easier. He understands that, especially for things like the market structure bill, this is potentially like his legacy bill. I mean, this is a very complicated piece of legislation. I worked at that personally as a staffer for Warren Davidson dating back to 2017. I mean, these efforts take years to get down the road. I'll never forget Kristen Gillibrand at our summit last week as well said, look, legislation takes time. And for one of her priorities wasn't crypto. It took almost 12 years. And we're saying, look, we don't want crypto legislation to become that long, but we understand that this is a really important issue. And we've had folks who really pushed it, who were senior level folks in Congress, like Pat Toomey, who are now gone. And we don't want to squander a situation where we put all this momentum, similar to what we did last year or last Congress of the Senate and Pat Toomey. And then when the leader leaves, we're back to square one. And I don't think that's the case. We know we built a large bipartisan base of support. We have new players on both sides of the aisle. But at the same time, the chair is really important. And those are the folks who get to determine what moves in their committee, what dies in their committee, and what's priority. And so we don't have Patrick McHenry. Crypto probably won't be the number one issue, at least in the House, if someone else new were to take over. Again, there's a slew of other folks. French Hill is one of those names being considered potentially next Congress as a lead of financial services for the Republicans. There's a lot of other names in the mix too, but it kind of, for at least the future of crypto legislation, the person does matter who's running that committee in terms of where they've ranked crypto legislation among other priorities like bank capital standards, ESG, housing, what have you.
French Hill would be a great option. He certainly understands it. He heads up, I believe, the subcommittee on digital assets. So that would be awesome. I want to talk about the Binance DOJ settlement. You and I have been talking about, Binance did not have a good reputation in DC for a long time. A lot of people had their targets on Binance. French Hill and Senator Cynthia Lummis both sent a letter to the DOJ regarding Binance and Tether. Since then, Binance and the DOJ have settled, big settlement, historic, in fact, CZ stepping down as CEO. Do you think that's fully resolved now? And what do you think is down the road for Tether?
So at least on the Binance side of things, you're right. We've been talking about this for over a year. During the whole FTX blow up, we were telling folks, look, if you think FTX is the only exchange that DC does not see favorably, think again. And we know the SEC thinks everyone's unfavorable, but we're talking about the DOJ here. It's a very different ballgame. Money laundering, sanction evasions, some very massive implications here legally. Tether was always, at least in DC, viewed pretty negatively as well. And I'd say like those are the last kind of two big holdups right now. Mine's like, there's some small players here and there. But for Tether, at least, the largest concerns usually start off with the issues of audits and reserves. For a while, there was unclear about what's actually making the reserves of Tether. It seems that they've shored that up in the past couple of months. There's also concerns about the audits being in more attestations. It seems they've largely shored that up. Again, at least from what I'm hearing from folks here in DC and their perception of Tether. But there's still this negative connotation with Tether, and that's more linked now to the financing of Hamas and other terrorist financing organizations. They're going through Tron, they're going through Binance, they're not going through Coinbase or all these other ones based in the United States. They're going to more of the offshore ones. And so that's where still there's a lingering concern about Tether. And again, I want to highlight this comes from Republicans, friendly Republicans of the industry. But they're calling a spade here and saying, look, at least from what we're seeing, we have some concerns on Tether. And so it's unclear if DOJ is involved fully on to the level that it was for Binance. But I will still say that even after Tether's efforts to try to correct some of the mistakes in the past, they still are, I would say, probably target number one post Binance right now.
Yeah, and great points there. I think the other factor too seems to be the big one is KYC AML. I think there's probably that question: are they actually enforcing that? Right, because that was what the DOJ pretty much charged Binance with. Like, hey, you weren't doing this maybe at a certain point. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe hopefully it's just like a settlement, like Binance. Hey, pay your settlement, get your books in order, and then you can keep doing your business.
Well, I'll also say, too, we had Wally Adeyemo, who's like the second in command for the Treasury Department over our conference last week. And that's also what he presented to the whole crypto industry, saying, I need some more authorities from Congress. That's on top of stablecoin legislation that they called for about 2 years ago. Now, they want to have extra sanctions, which largely it seems like most folks in the industry are saying, that makes sense. Like, that's a government thing. We are fine with secondary sanctions. It's when you expand the definition of Bank Secrecy Act and the idea that you have to have all these additional reporting requirements. And when it comes to at least the crypto industry, some folks just don't have that data. Like the technology does not be able to provide that. So compliance is impossible. And so it kind of provides the analog version to the digital world, and it just does not make sense. And at the same time, I think we're all seeing a lot of these reports, from terrorist financing, from cutting down on mixers, from cutting down on Binance. And folks in Congress are seeing that as, well, this entire area is ripe with illicit finance. But at the same time, Treasury is actually just utilizing their authority to go after bad actors. And I think they're doing that pretty well. And so we'll see exactly what the future of legislation looks like post those Treasury asks. But I will say there was a major focus on offshore stablecoins. And it seemed like it was really targeted at Tether. And I think that's something to watch out for, that if you are a stablecoin issuer and you're off the United States shore, the Treasury Department is very concerned about that.
Hi, everyone. Pardon the interruption. I'm Tony Edward, the founder and host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I have a huge favor to ask you. If you haven't subscribed as yet on YouTube or the podcast platforms, hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, hit the notification bell on the YouTube platform, and on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and review. It supports the podcast. It allows me to bring great quality content to you. Thank you for your support, and I'll let you get back to the content. Yeah, they certainly will have a target on their backs. That absolutely makes sense. So let's talk about the presidential debates that happened last night, the GOP presidential debates. Crypto was brought up. Vivek Ramaswamy slammed SEC Gary Gensler, brought up specifics like he couldn't say if Ethereum was a security or not. Ron DeSantis also weighed in. What were your thoughts on that?
I was actually a little shocked that this specific of a crypto question came up. Most of the conversations I've had with all the campaigns have been mostly on CBDCs. And I've worked with other folks, other campaigns on the Democrat side last cycle, more just advising them on, what's some potential good legislation to point to or some good holistic frameworks. But so we've seen the questions now pivot from more of a policy position to now the actual debate stage, which was shocking. Now, Vivek, I won't go into the rest of his debate performance. I didn't think he did too well overall, unfortunately. But he really hit the nail on the head when it came to the actual crypto question. And I think that's, my hope is that we kind of keep this bipartisan pressure on Gensler, because it's important to remind folks that literally last week we had Richie Torres say that Gary Gensler is the George Santos equivalent of a regulator. So it's coming from both sides here. And I want to make sure when at least we're in the Republican debate, things can get hyper partisan, but folks on both sides of the aisle hate Gary Gensler for a variety of reasons, but crypto being one of them. I think we're going to probably see more and more crypto-esque questions asked. You saw again, DeSantis went right into the central bank digital currency question. I think that's largely what we're going to see a lot of the focus on still. But at the same time, it's pretty crazy to see that crypto coming up in that kind of context. And again, to Vivek's credit, did a great job pushing back on issues like Hamas financing, the terrorist activities solely through crypto. He pushed back on that. He targeted Gary Gensler. He actually was, to your point, talking about specifics. So, and I was at the Texas Blockchain Council, North American Blockchain Summit in Texas 3 weeks ago. And he was actually the folks who went before my panel, Warren WSJ and Senator Cory Gardner. And him and RFK Jr. did a great job of, talking to the industry, hearing their concerns and outlining their position, whether it be more on the pro-Bitcoin side or more just pro-regulatory clarity side. So it's really kind of catching some mainstream attention from both the Democrat side and the Republican side. We'll see that percolates, though, to the final debate. I don't see a situation where Joe Biden's really talking about, Ethereum being a security or a commodity. But I do see situations where we could have, the Republican candidate, whoever he or she may be, versus Joe Biden talking about central bank digital currencies in the coming months.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The crypto's getting this type of coverage and being brought up, and it shows that it is a ballot issue. While it may not be the top issue, it's on the list for a lot of people and the future of jobs and innovation in the U.S. Now, yesterday, maybe you can give me some context on this. There was a hearing, and Elizabeth Warren and Jamie Dimon had an exchange. And of course, Jamie Dimon reiterated some of his classic takes on crypto, and he would shut it down and he hates it and all that. What was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. A lot of folks are focusing on Jamie Dimon response. I think it's important to focus on the Elizabeth Warren question. This is Elizabeth Warren. She has made her brand off hitting the banks. She has lambasted Wells Fargo CEO in particular, but all the other banks at these venues. This is kind of like her Super Bowl hearing that happens usually now once a year or once a Congress. But what was different this time, this is the first time that, at least in my recollection, that she has not attacked any of the banks whatsoever. She spent her entire 5 minutes focusing on money laundering concerns and crypto. And I had a few folks who texted me from more of the lobbying side of things, like some of their bank lobbyists are texting me saying, have fun, she's your problem now. Looks like, we got her off our back for once. And I had similar texts from the folks who work in private equity a couple months ago when she was going after us. I think that's kind of showing that Elizabeth Warren is now kind of morphing into her new brand, at least of sorts, when it comes to being the critic. But this time, instead of being the banks, it's on crypto. And now, again, I want to highlight that she's trying to push her legislation. It's called DAMLA for short, but she has a Republican on board. But at least here in DC, I think we've been able to rebuff a lot of her efforts. There's a House equivalent that's going to be introduced likely pretty soon. It's for Sean Casten from Illinois, but he has not been able to find a Republican yet to lead that bill. And it looks like, he probably will find one eventually. There's hundreds of them right now, but at least that effort in the House is really stalled out at the moment. And the last thing I think is really important is that, he mentioned this conference, but this is actually important. We gave Elizabeth Warren and Sean Casten an invite saying, hey, look, we'd love to have you guys come and just present your side of the situation. We think it's important at our conference to hear from both sides of the conversation of what your views are for crypto and money laundering. She outright denied. It was actually less than a mile away from the Capitol, but Sean Casten showed up. And I think that took a lot. It was really impressive on his end to go into the lines and his view and really talk directly to the crypto industry in a really curt manner. But Elizabeth Warren didn't choose that. She decided to actually just lambast us on Twitter, lambast us on in the media and the hearings without even sitting down. And that's actually been kind of the larger issue. Her staff's a different story. They have taken meetings with us, and I want to thank them for doing that. But the member herself, we have yet to see a single situation where she actually wants to engage with the industry. And we're trying to provide any avenue. We've let her pick the venue. We let her pick the speaker or folks she wants to talk with. Nothing. So that's been really unfortunate. And I think it kind of shows she's doing it for more the talking points and the notoriety and the crypto Twitter hate, and less about moving the policy itself. But don't get me wrong, there are a lot of other legislative items out there right now from Republicans and Democrats that very much mirror her objective. So it's definitely getting some traction, especially in the Senate.
So, and when you say the others, folks who have similar legislation that mirrors hers, is it a lack of education, or they are accepting her talking points, or a mix of both?
So the legislation I'm referring to, actually, it's going to be coming out later today, it looks like. It's from the same folks they call it the Can-See Act. It's mostly focusing on DeFi. So it's a bipartisan bill with Senator Round, Senator Romney, Senator Reid, and Senator Warner. And three of these four members sit on the relevant bank committee. So these are people who actually could move this legislation. And right now, they're allegedly introducing another bill today focusing on terrorism financing, again, with DeFi and the banks. Looks like this would be a lot more holistic than just the DeFi portion. And that bill, again, it's got significant bipartisan support and some pretty senior bipartisan support. So that's kind of our next thing to focus on. And it does come down to the lack of education, because what they're hearing right now is Bank Secrecy Act. It applies to JP Morgan. It doesn't apply to Coinbase. It doesn't apply to Binance. And for the reasoning and rationale, they say, see, look, Binance is the example. And we say, well, Binance was not here. They were actually performing no AML KYC whatsoever. And the DOJ and Treasury and what have you, it went after them, rightfully so. And they levied a massive fine against them. And they might be, potentially having CZ be locked up in jail for a little bit. I mean, this is Treasury working. This is OFAC working. These are what the regulators are supposed to do. Right. But in the view of some of these senators, it's that crypto is not doing enough. The banks are not doing enough, and we need to provide some more legislation. So that's going to be a really tough talking fight, especially, again, when these senators really don't know the technology. But that's what we're here for, and that's what it's going to be taking up our time for quite some time.
Oh, sure. Was there any blowback, or do you feel Elizabeth Warren lost some momentum with the misinformation she was putting out there about Hamas usage of crypto with the Wall Street Journal? I know the Wall Street Journal retracted a little bit of that. There was a lot of people tweeting about it, but did that slow her down in any way, or is she just continuing?
She's really dropped the Wall Street Journal reference recently, we've noticed. Sean Casten and a few others still keep reiterating that talking point. But I mean, there's also the other side of it here saying that, look, it doesn't matter if it was $130 million or it was $130,000. At the end of the day, both Republicans and Democrats agree it shouldn't be happening for $1 or $10 or those massive figures as well. So while there's disagreements and actually been proven that the Wall Street Journal article was wrong, there's still the pivot back to, well, it doesn't matter how much or little, none needs to happen. And that's where we're kind of seeing her pivot to. And we agree with that. And I think we want to work with her on something to that effect. It's a little difficult when she doesn't take the meetings. It's a little difficult when she won't engage with the industry, because we want to help solve this problem too. But also we want to also highlight again that the agencies seem to have this under control and are pursuing enforcement actions correctly on the DOJ side here. And they've sent a stark warning to the industry saying, get in compliance, have KYC, have AML, If you're doing U.S. stable coins, you might want to be onshore because that's has some very larger concerns, both macro politically as well as de-dollarization concerns and several others. So the warning shots are there. We'll see. There's enough momentum, at least for right now. In my view, I don't think those efforts got enough momentum at the moment. But the last thing I will say, stable coins, market structure, for any of those two bills to move forward, it looks like they're going to need to have an AML KYC sentiment or a section attached to it, because it seems that Senator Brown, the lead for the Senate Bank Committee, has been adamant that I'm not moving a single crypto bill unless you put some money laundering elements in there. And that's where the hard part comes in. So will both sides be able to come to agreements, or are both sides going to be entrenched and say, I don't like that bill or I don't like this bill, and we come to a standstill again?
Hard question for you. Presidential election coming up next year. Biden, of course, looking to be reelected. Do you think he could pull something out of the left field and say, all right, I'm doing an executive order for crypto regulations? Or do you think this still lays within Congress?
I think it largely lays in Congress unless we see a shift from Gary Gensler. Again, there's a lot happening with the Bitcoin ETF potentially coming pretty soon. We've seen some little delays recently, so that is a little concerning. He's got a lot of other pressures, it seems like. I think crypto is just too far down in terms of the list of pressing issues to really do a flip. And even if there was a chance where he says, hey, look, the polls aren't doing well, here's maybe a little switch policy-wise we can turn to get more support and such, I think they're going to run to Gary Gensler for a lot of these concerns. And Gary Gensler can, of course, pontificate on money laundering and all these other concerns that will, more in the DOJ side of things to slow things down. But at the end of the day, it comes down to Gary Gensler for a lot of stuff. And Joe Biden in particular will lean on the SEC to provide that opinion. I can't really prefer, you wish you talked to the CFTC because they have complete opposite perspectives of the situation. But that's currently how politics works. And I just don't see it at the current moment, given the posture of the past 3 years.
Sure. Final question here. Are there any upcoming hearings, or is it like the holidays around the corner, so it's looking forward to 2024?
2024. Actually, we're kind of in a really weird part of December for DC. Usually there's like this massive spending bill that they try to do every December. But the difference this year is that there's actually no defense, or so there's no big spending bill right now. And so all the funding for the government, because we prevented 2 shutdowns by kicking the can down the road, that's going to come up in January and February, right when crypto legislation in the House is going to get voted on. So mind you, the Republicans also just lost Kevin McCarthy at the end of this month. They have like a 1 or 2 seat majority. So Republicans, which have been thin already and have been really having a hard time funding government at all the past couple of months, they have to fund the government again in January and February with a 1 or 2 vote margin. And then they have to do crypto legislation on top of all the other legislations out there in the next 3 months. I mean, they can kick the can to April, May, and June, but that definitely hurts the prospects here. So I just want to warn folks. McHenry's been saying Q1 2024, but it's going to get really divisive really soon, and we could be ending a shutdown pretty soon if the Republicans and Democrats don't find a way to work together, and that can delay any crypto legislation for quite some time. So. I'm going to be cautious of folks saying, we're really looking forward to 2024 and Q1. But if you do the math here, it's going to be really tough to get anything, let alone crypto, after they fund the government. And we could be heading to a shutdown if they can't.
Oh, boy. Hopefully the government can get its act together and we get these things done, man. Okay. It is what it is. We just have to keep doing I mean, you guys are doing the great work, advocating, educating, and so forth. And we'll keep calling our representatives and put pressure on them.
That's the thing we can ask for. Just talk to your representatives. This is why crypto needs to stay bipartisan, because it's a split Congress. And if the Republicans are great for us and the Democrats are bad, or vice versa, it's going to be hard to get anything done. And I think we've done a really good job so far. But when things like Vivek and the debate happen and Elizabeth Warren makes these comments, I just want to keep reminding folks that it's not the Democrats who are all bad. We actually have a lot of good Democrat folks. We have a lot of good Republicans, and we have a lot of bad Republicans too on this issue. So I think it's a bipartisan hate and love situation. So let's make sure we support both sides of the aisle, because that's the only chance forward we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, thank you so much, man. Always great insights. I appreciate you.
Anytime. Thanks for having me again.